I've been practicing medicine for over 25 years, and I've seen it. The world is hurting, people are sick, and even with our greatest scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs, trends in health are not getting better. We weren't designed for this. This world as we know it, it's not our home. But there is a remedy. Our Creator designed us to be resilient creatures, and He's given us clues in the Scriptures that have dramatic implication for our lives today. Let's talk about biblical prescriptions. Let's take a serious look at living as God intended. Are you ready? Let's get well, and let's go home.
Welcome to the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast, presented by Heartwise Ministries. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, here with Dr. James L. Marcum, author of Biblical Prescriptions for Life. He's also a cardiologist, a father of two. And Dr. Marcum, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Nick, and I want to thank our loyal listeners and viewers for joining us on the podcast, and hopefully we can talk about something that's interesting to them and also that they can apply to their lives to make their lives better. And, you know, what's nice about doing a podcast, Nick, is it's a little bit less formal. You have a little bit more time, and you can sort of let people know, you know, what we do that's a little bit different than others. And at Heartwise, there's a place for modern medicine, mainly taking care of acute problems, heart attacks, heart going too slow, infections, bleeding. There's a place for lifestyle medicine, okay? You know, eating good, exercising, thinking right, great place for that. But what we do different is we sort of bring everything together, letting people know that the key to the health is the relationship that they have with Christ, the ultimate physician.
That's right.
Because He gives us the power to see what we need to know. There's the power to do things for the right reasons. Even if we can't do anything and we have some bad genes and bad everything, He gives us hope, not only in the short term, but in the future, because He's promised to heal us in His time, which may not always be our time. And so that's what we do a little bit different here at Heartwise.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you travel a fair bit. Yeah. You just recently were traveling some. Tell us a little bit about where you went and why.
Well, I went to the Galapagos Islands. And for those that don't know where that is, that's off the coast of Ecuador. I'm not very good with geography, so if I mess up, you let me know, Nick, because you know geography better than I do. But anyway, I went mainly because you need some time off. Sometimes you just need a break, and it was a good time to take a break. And this is one of the first vacations that circumstances had it that I really sort of took it by myself. I went with a group of friends, but I still had a lot of downtime, a lot of time to think, a lot of time to read, a lot of time to pray, a lot of time to put things together that I've never really done before.
Right.
And why I was excited about the Galapagos Islands is because when I went to school at the University of Texas, almost everyone, all my classes, especially the animal behavior and animal science classes, talked about the Galapagos Islands and Darwinism. Darwin, people that don't know, Darwin, he floated around in a boat called the HMS Beagle in the 1840s. And in the 1840s, there was a big explosion of information, both spiritual information as well as all sorts of information. Printing was getting high gear. People were starting to move communications around. People were learning. And Darwin went around on a 5-year trip around, really sailed around the world. But part of that time he spent in the Galapagos Islands. So what I did, and I don't want to bore everybody, but I flew from Tennessee to Atlanta to Quito, Ecuador, which is one of the highest places in the United States.
As far as elevation?
Yeah. And I stayed at a beautiful place with a glass hotel where I had glass on 3 sides of the room I stayed in and just beautiful vistas and views out there. I stayed there a night, and then I flew the next day. We flew over to the Galapagos Islands, and then we started, I went on a lot of tours of the different places, saw lots of the water, and, one of the towns, I walked up and down the streets. I was able to visit the Charles Darwin Research Center on that island. And then we spent a lot of time looking at animals, whether that be tortoises or different birds or iguanas. There were a lot of iguanas there. There are species in the Galapagos that are only in the Galapagos and nowhere else. Because Galapagos is neat because a couple of reasons. They have different currents that come into that area from northern and southern hemisphere. And they also sit on these plates under the earth called tectonic plates. The tectonic plates there create an atmosphere for volcanoes, also earthquakes, and sudden shifts in the land.
Right.
In fact, the Galapagos is made of a bunch of volcanoes that have erupted at various times. In fact, one of them has erupted as early as 2010.
Oh, wow.
One of the islands that I visited, Isabella Island, very famous for its tortoises, had 5 different types of volcanoes, 5 different types of different types of rocks that were in different states of explosion, basically. But all of them made of lava, very hard to live in, very unique habitats for animals. So there's species in the Galapagos, like the Galapagos penguins, which I got a peek of. And there's only not too many of those. The only place in the world where you see them. Certain birds like finches and blue-footed boobies and all sorts of interesting birds.
What is the blue-footed booby?
A blue-footed booby is just a bird that is unique to this area, and he has blue feet.
So why the blue feet?
It's to help scare off predators, and it's sort of a protective mechanism.
So a defense mechanism.
Yes, a defense mechanism. But all these animals, unique species that are only seen here in the world. So the Galapagos people, they protect these animals like crazy. For instance, one of the finches that were there is called the mangrove finch. And the mangrove finch is near extinction now. And they found out what was you had a fly that was eating the eggs. So they've now found the fly, and they're trying to exterminate that fly. And they take the eggs out before the flies can get it, and they grow these mangrove finches so that won't be extinct. They have a very famous tortoise at one time called Lonesome George. And Lonesome George, bless his heart, he was 140, 50 years old. Tortoises live a long time.
Yeah.
I guess because they don't have to expend much energy. But he was the last of his kind, found on an island called Pinta Island. And, when they say one of his kinds, all of these are in the family, but they have different shells usually, or different beaks. They have different features of these animals that are usually in the same species, but have traits that help them adapt to where they live. And based on where they lived related to the volcanoes, different tortoises would have different shells based on the protection they might need from predators or whatever. Well, Lonesome George was the last one, and they tried to mate him for years and years and years, but he was just too tired, too old. So eventually, Lonesome George passed away. And when he died, it was sort of a sad day because they sort of, put him up above a pedestal. He had his own place in the museums and everything. But when he died, he didn't reproduce. He was the last of his kind. And they stuffed Lonesome George and put him in a museum. But everywhere you go down there, they have pictures of him, statues of him, put him on churches. I even have a hat down there with a picture of him on it. He's very famous. But the point I want to make is, in these islands, one of the things that make it unique so much, Nick, is that all these different species are there. So when Darwin saw the different species, that's when he came up with these theories that sort of grew and grew and grew. And that's where the theory of evolution really started and got its roots. And he saw different species within a short area, and he says, well, these species evolve. They change from one line to another. So different people through the years, like Lamarck and other scientists, have grown with those theories until they've come up with different theories of our origins and different. So I went there to understand what Darwin was seeing. I went there to understand a little bit more about some of the theories I was taught in school at the University of Texas about these things. And I also wanted to decide what I believed. Everyone has to decide what they believe for themselves. You can't really accept someone else's belief systems. You have to say, well, what do I believe? Why? What's the evidence say? What is my true north? And that's what we try to give people in healthcare. When they come and ask us questions or our viewpoints, we don't want to say that we are a sole market on truth, but we're a voice based on where we're at right now in time. Because as you grow, sometimes your theories and things change. I know I've changed a lot over the years. As you learn more, as God works in you, you see things differently and you present things differently. But anyway, so I went to understand how that all worked together, because that's very important for biblical prescriptions for life. We take the Bible and we use it as a source of truth. in healthcare, because there's so many people out there spouting truth. How do you know who or what to believe? So we know that the Bible is a source of truth, and the Bible doesn't contradict itself. The Bible has truth that apply to every aspect of our life, including health.
Right.
And so I really wanted to know about the origins and about evolution, about those things. So that brought me to the beautiful islands of Galapagos. We did a lot of boating, a lot of snorkeling, a lot of seeing animals. It was just a very good time to be away and do some thinking. And it's nice to be back, though.
Yeah, as I say, it sounds like you're kind of following a biblical prescription for life by getting away.
You're right.
Taking some time to rest and reflect on God's creation and different things. Now, you studied before medical school. You studied zoology, right?
That was my major, zoology, and that was basically, for those that don't know what that is, that's the study of animal life. Now we know about plants, but they study animals in general. So we studied a lot about animals and animal systems and animal behavior, and looking at butterflies and where they move around within a habitat. Did that for a while. Studying how blue whales signal each other across the ocean through sonar, how animals communicate with each other, how their brains work. We also studied how the development of animals came, and that's what so interests me in Darwin, because Darwin taught evolution, where species adapted and changed. And these are genetic changes that allow certain species, certain types of the species to thrive, and those traits develop, while those that don't have traits that will keep them alive do not develop. Predators get them, basically.
Right.
So, and so that was what got me so interested in that trip. And one of the things I wanted to know, you always hear, about, well, how did it all start?
Right.
And that's the scripture I wanted to talk about today is from Genesis 1. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. And that's that is a biblical prescription for life. It was what's the biblical prescription for life for that?
Yeah. How do you apply that?
Yeah. Well, belief system, what you believe in is important. And you cannot inherit someone else's beliefs. These are beliefs that you have to have in your heart. And those are the beliefs that change you. For instance, if you go to the doctor, Nick, and someone gives you a pill to swallow, there's a belief system that what's in that pill is in that pill. What's in this pill will do something. And the person that told me to take this pill knew what they were talking about. So there's a lot of belief systems in all sorts of things that we do these days.
Right. Yeah.
When you're at a red light, there's a belief system that everyone else understands that red means to stop. So belief systems affect the way our brain works mainly, but our brain affects the way our body works. In fact, there's been numerous studies done through the years that people that take sugar pills for something like pain or even high blood pressure, the sugar pills, which we call a placebo, in 1/3 of the time, it works just as good as a real pill. And a lot of people call it the placebo effect. I call it healing beliefs. Beliefs that people have internalized that help them, that helps their brain, that helps their chemistry, fight disease, fight situations, no matter what that might be. So we've known about the placebo effect healing beliefs for years, but also, our origins, our belief of who made us, where we came from. Well, I believe that in the beginning, God created. Now, that is a theory. And there's many other theories. Now, I don't think, in my viewpoint, that anyone knows for sure because they weren't there. So a lot of these theories, whether it be the theory of creation, the theory of evolution, the Big Bang theory, you hear a lot of them. That's why they're called theories.
They can't be proven,
right? But
they're largely accepted by different groups of people.
But when you think about belief systems, belief in a testimony, okay, that could be used as a definition of faith. Faith is belief in a testimony. So if you're going to believe in a theory, you're going to want to know, well, you believe in a testimony. Well, whose testimony do I want to believe in? Do I want to believe in the God of the universe? Do I want to believe in a scientist? Do I want to believe in a celebrity? Who do I want to believe in? So a lot of these things that we do, that these systems of beliefs that change our lives, depend on who we believe in. Who do we trust? Expectations for the future, faith. So these beliefs, we know the placebo also affect us. But when you have belief in God as our creator, that is something that brings our brains to a higher level. It brings us to the prefrontal cortex where God talks to us. What differentiates us from animals is our beliefs, our brains. And we know when that happens, we begin to understand the part of our brain called love. So belief in our creator created us. He loves us. He wants us to do better. He wants us to turn on the good chemistry, to turn off the stress chemistry. When we believe in a loving God that created us, that creates the chemistry of love. We know that loving, selfless chemistry turns down stress, improves our immune system, lowers blood pressure, which lowers the risk of heart attack, lowers our inflammation, helps our entire body when we believe in a loving God, a loving creator. We've seen that in some of the original studies that have talked about worship. You know, how worship, when we believe in this God, that Christians live longer than others. Intercessory prayer helps us do better. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that says our belief systems really matter in our health. Well, you might ask, well, what about people that believe in evolution or the Big Bang Theory, for instance?
Right.
Well, I'm not saying that they aren't nice people, but really those theories eventually say that we are evolving. So we're not evolving to get worse, we're evolving to get better, including our brains. Mm-hmm. So some of those theories say that man's brains, millions and millions of years ago wasn't very good, but now it keeps evolving to higher levels, to figure out problems, to do more things, to accomplish more. So some of those theories eventually say, we are going to be God, because we're going to continue to evolve to these higher and higher states of being.
Right.
So when we think we can do everything, or we can evolve, or we can do everything better than anybody else, and we don't need a creator because we're evolving, that's selfish chemistry. Because, it's about us. It's about what we can do, what we can accomplish, what we can heal, what procedures we have, how we can do everything better. We don't need anything else because we're evolving. Now, the people that don't evolve are going to die forever. The people that continue to evolve are going to come to these higher and higher levels. It might take a long period of time, but some of the theories teach that. Well, that is a selfish type philosophy. We know that selfishness creates the stress chemistry, which actually ages the body, shortens the telomeres, which causes us to have more mutations, which cause us to eventually have more problems physically. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the things that I learned at the Galapagos, and I just wanted everyone to focus on what you believe in. What do you have faith in? What theory do you have? Because it definitely affects your health. For biblical prescriptions, why it's so important is if you don't believe that God created, if you don't believe that He's a creator God, then what are you going to say about the Bible? And all these other biblical prescriptions? We've really thrown those out the windows if you don't believe in God the creator.
Right.
Now, how He created, the when and the time, well, that's all, that debates, and many people have different views on those things. Mm-hmm. But believing that God created, that you have a creator God that loved you, that made you for a purpose, made you for a reason, all of those things help our belief systems, which help our chemistry, which is a biblical prescription for life. So those are some of the things I learned on the Galapagos. And, there's so many interesting things that people can look at the Galapagos, from the turtles to the iguanas. They had marine iguanas that swam underwater even. Mm-hmm. They had all sorts of great things to look at in that. I want to encourage anyone, if they can do that. We'll try to get some pictures up so people can look at this. But I want people today on our podcast, Nick, to just know that a biblical prescription is to believe in God. Believe that He's your creator God, because it changes your chemistry.
That's right. Believe in a creator who designed us to love and to be other-centered, not selfish.
Yes, and that's a biblical prescription for life, because that's the way we were designed to live. And I believe that's the way God's living, because, why would He, create us? He created us in His own image. So we're created like our God. We're designed to love and care and to do those things. And when we violate those, it puts stress on our body, and things start malfunctioning, things start aging, bad chemistry starts to happen. So that's our podcast focus of today.
So one quick question here before we wrap it up. What was the one single most interesting thing you found on your trip? Well,
one of the things that I was really looking forward to was seeing penguins. At the Chattanooga Zoo, we have different types of penguins, mainly from the cold environments. But accordingly, there's some warm environment penguins. You don't usually see penguins living out in the 70s and 80s.
Right, yeah.
In an equatorial type climate. So there's this one species of penguins that were supposedly unique to the Galapagos, but they're very rare and very hard to see. So on my next to last day, we went to an island on a boat called Isabella Island, and boat trips aren't very fun sometimes. This was an up and down boat. I sort of got a little sick at my stomach, but we were there looking at animals, and there, lo and behold, swimming right beside the boat were 2 Galapagos penguins. That was probably one of the highlights, but another highlight was I had time to read, I had time to think, I had time just to relax and just to be away. We weren't on the grid, not a lot of media, not a lot of cell phones, not a lot of questions. It gave me some time to rest, and I would advise that for anyone. Take some vacation time, get some rest, relax, talk to your inner self, have some time to learn, and not be in a rush. That's a great prescription as well.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Marcum, thank you for sharing with us. It's a really interesting place to go, I'm sure, and a lot of interesting animals. But, you brought a perspective there that I wouldn't have necessarily thought about of how our beliefs really do change our physiology. And,
you carry your beliefs with you every day.
That's right.
And your belief systems affect every decision you make. Every decision you make indirectly affects your health, whether it be what you do during the day, the things you watch, the exercise you might get, the movement. But your belief systems is a setup for all of health. And that's why we believe that the best person to lead this is not a doctor, is not an exercise physiologist, though they're great people. The best person to be your healthcare leader is Christ. When we talked about origins and, we talked about a little bit about what you believe in, but when, you believe in God, that sort of brings you to different set of beliefs and truths than might be if you go and believe in evolution. And in the Bible, there's that text, you shall know the truth, and the truth sets you free.
Yeah.
So when you are in line with the belief system, the way God made us to believe, we are free. And when we're enslaved by these other false beliefs, even if sometimes they bound us, we're a slave, it's not a good thing. And I found out that the truth in these texts that they're talking about in my life, you shall know the truth. The truth is that Jesus is our Savior, wants to be in a relationship with it. That's the truth. And when we put that truth in our life, then we start to experience freedom.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Marcum, thank you for sharing with us again. And,
my pleasure.
I think we're going to talk a little bit more about your Galapagos trip on the next podcast. We've got some more good information from that.
Okay. Thanks, Nick.
So thank you all for listening. This is the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast presented by Heartwise Ministries. And if you enjoyed today's discussion or you want to hear more, subscribe to our podcast. You can do so on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube. And if you want to submit a question, go to our website, biblicalprescriptions.com. Go to the podcast page and you can submit your question there. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to sharing with you again next week when we discuss more about getting well and going home.